Morning, everyone. I can feel a sort of tangible buzz in this chapel this morning as we gather as a whole school for the first time since our carol service in late December. And I have to say, it feels really exciting to be back here as a whole community. And it's St. David's Day, and it's the 1st of March, and we've chosen this day to gather as we step into March after what has been quite a brutal January with Omicron and February. And I have to praise all of you for the resilience and courage in which you addressed all the challenges we faced in the first half of this term. And it is St. David's Day, and something I talk about a lot here, that diversity is our strength, and that it's so important we celebrate each other's cultures, and hence why many of you are wearing a daffodil today, a symbol of Wales on St. David's Day. And so to begin, we are going to sing Callan Lan, number 11 in your hymn book. And you had a little teaching session last term, on how to do it. And as we are back all together, and we do have some special guests here today, let's show them how we sing at Shawnigan, and let us lift the roof of our chapel with our masks on, and let us blast out a hymn that we love and generations of Shawnigan students have loved over time. Over to you, Tricia. Please be seated. So you're probably wondering what's all this about, and that's fine. It's with great excitement that I, together with the leadership team and board of Shawnigan Lake School, announce that a new co-educational grade 8 boarding house will be constructed starting this spring behind Renfrew House. Building on the tremendous success of Stanton and Levine, created in recent years as nurturing environments for our grade 8 girls and boys respectively, the two houses will join together in a new and pioneering co-educational boarding space planned for September 2023. Please put your hands up if you have been in Levine, Stanton, or the Nest as a student or duty staff. Just take a moment to put your hands up, and I'm sure up at the top there'll be some as well. Well, you have all contributed to this vision and the success of this project. The new boarding house will consist of one wing for Stanton, the grade 8 girls, and the other for Levine, grade 8 boys, with intentional gathering spaces in the middle, and will be named Samuel House in honor of Gaynor and Rodri Samuel and their unstinting and exemplary Thank you for that spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling towards two treasured members of our community. In fact, Gaynor called me into our office yesterday and started wagging her finger at me, and I managed to lie through my teeth that this was going to be a very mundane chapel service. And look, we've sprung all sorts of members of your family on you, and I know you'll be wagging your finger at me later. Anyway, we've done this because of your unstinting and exemplary service to our school. And I know you both hate the limelight as well, but enjoy this service from us. Gaynor and Rod, well, you know them as Mr. and Mrs. Samuel, but for now, let's go with Gaynor and Rod, have dedicated their lives to Shawnigan for nearly 30 years. Before my wife, Kathleen, and I arrived at Shawnigan, we were told that the Samuels embodied the true soul of Shawnigan, and so they do. Their leadership in our community is extraordinary and a role model for all, from their uniquely warm welcome and generosity of spirit to the memorable and heartfelt connections that they establish with everyone. Over the past 14 years, parent after parent has trusted Gaynor's judgment in her capacity as Executive Director of Admissions. She lives for you, the students, and follows your journey with genuine delight from interview to opening day, to graduation, and beyond. I am sure each of you remembers your first visit to the school and how Mrs. Samuel made you feel. She has a unique ability to make each of you feel special, feel you belong. Universally admired within and beyond the school and renowned for his essential humanity, Rod has contributed in so many ways to our school. Biology teacher, house director, first 15 boys rugby coach, senior master, director of alumni engagement, and an inspiration to us all. The double blue of Ripley's house runs in both of their veins, and it's good to see Ripley's at the front of chapel this morning. They led the house and provided trusted mentorship to their charges for 16 years, from 1993 to 2009, with Rod as house director and Gaynor as house mother, as she called herself. The house motto, Acta non verba, actions not words, was central to their leadership, and the boys loved the way the house was run. Their sons, Daffod, class of 2008, and Owen, class of 2009, here with us today and in our God Squad today, were both in Ripley's. In parallel, Gaynor also took on the house director role of Renfrew, providing her unique brand of strong yet loving leadership. Gaynor and Rod are tremendous supporters of coeducation at Shawnigan and have worked tirelessly to support and contribute to the design of the new Grade 8 house and the development of the Grade 8 experience. The school has chosen to name the new coeducational Grade 8 boarding house Samuel House. As we have developed this concept, our board and several community leaders have stepped forward with enthusiasm and generous support for the project and its naming after the Samuels. One supporter wrote last week with the following message: "I have goosebumps over the decision to call the Grade 8 boarding house Samuel House, and in capitals, I love it. Our Advancement and Community Engagement team will be inviting all members of our community to support this initiative. Gaynor and Rod, after consulting their sons, have chosen to give the house a one-word motto, Catrev. And if you're struggling to pronounce that, think of cat, as in cat cholak, and the rev, put them together, and you've got it. It's spelt C-A-R-T-R-E-F, but think cat, rev, and you're away. Catrev translates from Welsh, their mother tongue, as a loving community, a nurturing home away from home for our grade 8 students as they embark on their Shawnigan journey. It will greet every student who walks through the door of Samuel House. Gaynor and Rod, having grown up in a small coal mining valley in South Wales, generously share their Welsh culture with the Shawnigan community. From the Callan Lan hymn that is sung with gusto and joy by generations of students, to Rod's storytelling and introduction to Welsh myths in chapel. By choosing a Welsh motto from their homeland, Rod and Gaynor speak to the cultural diversity that is our strength here at Shawnigan. It is fitting that the school has chosen St. David's Day, 1st of March, to make the announcement. The symbol of the house will be a dragon, steeped in Welsh history and literature, and the Stanton and Levine students' colours will form a combination of pink and brown. I'm wearing a combination of pink and brown today in tribute to Samuel House and its future. The main foyer will highlight the service-mindedness of the Samuels, and the house directors of the Stanton and Levine wings will educate our younger students in the values of humility, compassion, and community that Gaynor and Rod represent at Shawnigan. The Samuel House hymn will be Callan Lan, which was first introduced at Shawnigan by Rod many years ago. As Rod and Gaynor have welcomed so many of us in their inimitable way, so will our new and pioneering coeducational grade 8 boarding house greet, guide, nurture, and support all who enter our school from so many regions of the world. And never fear, Gaynor and Rod are not retiring anytime soon. They're looking forward to the next chapter of their story at Shawnigan, welcoming new families and reconnecting with the school's network of alumni, parents, staff, and supporters, both on and off campus. Quite simply, Gaynor and Rod, you both make our hearts sing. It's a privilege to give you the naming of the house. Thank you. So that was the painful part. Now you can sit back and enjoy, because we've got a few surprises, but this is all about you enjoying this service. And the Rev has handed over to me the responsibility of coordinating. And next up is Andrew Doyle, House Director of Ripley's, proud Welshman. Over to you, Andrew.
Good morning, everyone. As Mr. Lamont said, it's absolutely brilliant to see so many people back in the chapel here today. It's been too long. We haven't been able to gather, and it's just fantastic to see everybody in here. So happy St. David's Day to you all. Not only is St. David's Day a very special day for Welsh people all over the globe, obviously it's an extra meaningful day for two of our own very special Welsh people here at Shawnigan. It's great to have so many members of the family, of the Samuel family here today, and I know there are others watching online back in Wales and other parts of Canada. It was Mr. Samuel who was responsible for me coming to Canada, and then Shawnigan, obviously. When I arrived in 2001, they were like a second family to me, and I spent a considerable amount of time in their company. It's strange how memories work, but one of my early memories was spending hours beating these two young men at the NHL 2001 and the PlayStation. And back then, Mrs. Samuel had a passion for shopping that Mr. Samuel says she still has. But I remember every time, often when she went to Victoria, she would come back having tried to set me up on blind dates with random people that she met in the shops. Obviously, it's been a long time since the four of them have been back at the school in the chapel here together. And Rids, if you're wondering, yes, your record still stands. Meredith, as I know him, leads the Shawnigan record for having spent most time on the Wilberforce than any other student. Well, you've heard references to St. David's Day so far, but before I briefly talk about him, let me talk about where he and us are from. There are many of us in here today who come from Wales. For those who don't know where Wales is, it's one of the countries that make up the United Kingdom, and we border England on one side and the ocean on the other side. Wales is a very small country in size. It's smaller than Vancouver Island, and the population is just over 3 million people. All of us Welsh people in here today are first language Welsh, and we're more comfortable conversing with each other in Welsh rather than English. However, only about 30% of people in Wales speak Welsh. So we'll change that right now. Bore da means good morning. So let's hear you. Bore da. Bore da. Population has increased. So, when you see the Samuels or myself walking the corridors, please do swing by and say Bore da. It will make our day. Wales is a beautiful place and is famous for its natural beauty, rugged coastline, castles, singing, mining, farming, and of course our biggest passion is supporting our national rugby team and anybody who's playing against England. We even have a few famous people that hail from Wales. Dylan Thomas, the poet, actors of note such as Anthony Hopkins, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Christian Bale, who you probably know from the Batman movies. We have great singers like Sir Tom Jones, and of course some great athletes. The Tour de France winner of a few years ago, Geraint Thomas, former Welsh rugby captain Sam Warburton, and the world soccer superstar Gareth Bale were not only from the same school, they were in the same class at their high school in Wales. So imagine playing inter-house against those guys. So on to St. David's. Who was he? St. David was the patron saint of Wales. England have, anybody know? St. George. Scotland have, and it's not Mr. Lynn, St. Andrews. And you probably all know the Irish one, probably the most famous of them all, as St. Patrick's. St. David is to have believed on March the 1st, same day as today, in the year 589. Mrs. Samuel said that's around the same time as Mr. Samuel graduated high school. St. David was known for performing miracles. It is said that he restored the sight of the blind, resurrected a dead child, and the one I remember being taught as a child is when he was preaching, people at the back couldn't see him, took a handkerchief out, stood on it, and the ground raised in front of it, raised on which he was stood, and everybody could hear and see him. So why are we wearing daffodils? Well, there are numerous versions and reasons. One of the most told stories are that St. David's ordered the Welsh to wear leeks on their helmets as they battled the Saxons for identification purposes because both shared the same uniform. It has transpired into daffodils over the years, and some people would suggest, and looking at my daffodil today, it probably gives good evidence to that, that the leek and the leek flower resembles a daffodil. We're not sure, but what we do know is if you go to a rugby game in Cardiff, and there's 80,000 people there, you will see hundreds and hundreds of people walking with gigantic daffodil hats on, daffodils painted on their face, and leeks pinned proudly on their shirts. As a kid, we loved St. David's Day. Classes were replaced by a whole day of inter-house type competitions, ranging from poetry, singing, dancing, to rock bands. It was a great day, and if you did well and won your internal school competition, you would move on and compete against people from another local school. And then if you did well there, you'd move on and you'd compete against your district, province, and then until it culminated in a 2-week-long festival during the middle of the summer called the National Eisteddfod. I often speak to the young men of Ripley's how important it is to lead by example. St. David was known for this. It is stated that his final words were, "Be joyful, keep the faith, and do the little things that you have heard and seen me do." At Shawnigan, we take pride in doing the little things that have a big impact on our community and the lives of others. Finally, for me, a few lines that sum up what it is to be Welsh is done well in this poem. To be born Welsh is to be born privileged, not with a silver spoon in your mouth, but music in your blood and poetry in your soul. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I hope you will enjoy a few bits of poetry, a couple of songs, and a legendary myth about a dog. I think we're now going to sing Guide Me, O the Great Jehovah, number 12. Please grab your books quietly, please.
Please be seated. Two things that guide me, O thou great Jehovah, if you've ever been to a rugby international in Cardiff, is sung with great passion. They often say that it's very intimidating and Wales plays with a 16th player. because the crowd are so passionate and sing and sing and sing. If ever you get the chance, please experience that. And secondly, you're wearing daffodils there, and I had a lovely exchange with a member of staff, Mrs. Grass, the wonderful Mrs. Grass. I'm sure she's in here somewhere thinking, damn, what's he going to be talking about? But she came past me and she said, every year I buy leeks and daffodils for the Samuels and deliver it to them. What's going on this year? I've driven up and down Cowichan Valley and no one has any daffodils to sell. She hadn't realized that Mrs. Miranda had bought 600 daffodils the day before for you all. So Mrs. Grass thwarted momentarily. Next up, we're going to have Avon Thomas, who's in Stanton, in grade 8. She's going to come up and read a poem representing grade 8, but also she represents her family, the Thomas family, who have a very strong connection with Shawnigan, and Gran Thomas, her grandfather, is great friends with Rod and Gaynor. So from the Thomas family, here comes Avon.
Wheel Dewi Sant Happies, St. David's Day. A land of rugged mountains, a land of finest slate, the sound of rushing rivers gives us cause to celebrate. A land of ancient forests, green valleys, grazing sheep, gives the people of St. David a land they wish to keep. Follow the red dragon flag, and parades led by Welsh bands raise voices in the choirs to salute this lovely land. For here in Wales or far away, the Welsh remember still, and on St. David's Day with pride wear leek or daffodil.
Well done, Avon. It takes great courage to stand up in front of the whole school. A lovely reading of that. And next up, we have Mark Yorith of Ripley's House. He also has Welsh blood in him, and his parents, teachers down at SMU, have been lifelong friends of Rod and Gaynor, and we invite Mark up to represent his family.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to say a few words at this special gathering. I'm proud of the fact that I have Welsh heritage. My father was born and raised in Wales and emigrated to Canada as a young teacher, much similar to Mr. Samuel. And he's been friends with the Samuels for a long, long time. I'm not going to say what year. When I was in kindergarten, my teacher asked the students to have one of their parents tell something about their family growing up in their country of birth. I would like to share a part of what my father wrote for me. To this day, I'm a proud Canadian, but I also consider myself a true Welsh Canadian. His story is entitled, I Was Young Once. My father's side of our family came from Breconshire in Wales, and after centuries of farming, moved into the coal mining valleys of the south. And it was here that I lived my early life. I was young once, and I lived in a deep, deep valley, which was beautiful, before the men came to dig for the coal. In the bottom of the valley was a river which ran crystal clear before the miners came. The towns in the valley and the water in the river were as black as the coal that came out of the ground when I was young. Long before I was born, the river teemed with trout and salmon, but when I was young, only minnows survived. The terraced houses in the towns all looked alike, built row upon row for the miners who worked half a mile underground at the coal face. The only way to tell the houses apart were by their numbers. I lived at 29 Queens Road. We never saw the Queen. A strange thing happened every year during the closing of the mines. When I was young, the coal companies kept a stable of pit ponies underground to pull the wagons of coal. The poor old pit ponies were slaves, chosen to live their lives in the blackness of the mine tunnels. They worked for 8 hours every day in exchange for food, water, and shelter. No one thought of it as cruelty, even though they only saw the light of day for 2 weeks each year. The miners' fortnight was their holiday too. They were allowed to live like real horses for 14 glorious days. How sad. When I was young, I preferred my life to theirs. On the hilltops above the valley, it was still very beautiful. There were cold, clear springs of gurgling water. There were ferns as tall as we kids. And from the very highest point, we could see the ocean. For us, the hills were a playground, a world away from the grime and smoke of the valley. In the dingle, bluebells and daffodils carpeted the ground between the silver birch trees, which were our protection against enemy fire. We played sports, we walked, we ran, we trespassed on farmers' fields, and we laughed. When I was young, I felt as free as a bird and give little thought to the men with the black, tired faces whose lives were as hard as their hobnailed boots. The Romans had come to this part of Wales 2,000 years ago, but had left with no conquest to their name. The Welsh tribes knew the hills too well. On the hill above my village is a Roman centurion's gravestone, the only evidence that remains of their having ever been there at all. Just like the sheep, they probably found the winters too wet, too windy, and just too bleak. Yes, the sheep. There are many sheep when I was young. To escape the harsh winter weather on the hilltops, the sheep often foraged the garbage cans of my village. They preferred them to the coarse winter grasses. Inevitably, their stay was all too short, as the farmer and the sheepdogs came to round them up and return them to their rightful home. When I was young, the image of winter Wales was a shaggy sheep huddled against stone walls to shelter from the driving horizontal rain. And my image of Sunday dinner was the best Welsh lamb. Their sacrifice was not in vain. When I was young, the castles were even then very, very old. I did not have to read about medieval castles. I could play in them, probably just where King Arthur had met with his knights. I was always Sir Lancelot and rarely lost a battle, but sometimes there was a truce when young playmates were called home for lunch. There were occasional trips to Cardiff, our proud national capital. The small steam trains slowly down to the sea level, following the bubbly Rumney River. There was always excitement on the journey, although it only lasted 40 minutes. After all, we were the Valley Boys on a day out. We usually came to watch the rugby, and we all dreamed of one day wearing the scarlet shirt with the Prince of Wales feathers emblazoned on the left breast. The crowd in the stadium numbered 60,000, all singing like angels in four-part harmony. How could Wales lose with such passionate support? It was our religion, and the gods were on the field. And not noted by my father in the story is that he made the Welsh rugby squad in 1968, a very long time ago, and while he never got on the field for the squad, to me, he still reached God status. It has been many, many years since I lived in Wales, but Mark will visit there with his family in a few years' time. I hope that he is proud to have some Welsh heritage, and it will be an opportunity for him to see where his ancestors came from. At the parish church at St. Sannans, there's a graveyard where Mark's great-grandmother is buried, and I hope he will be able to visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. What a beautiful storyteller you are as well. I'm pleased English department make notes. You've got his tales from the Yorth Long Room to come in future terms. Wonderfully read. Next up, and I think as we've chosen the school hymn, There's a Voice in the Wilderness Crying, which is number one, and this is tribute to your dedication to Shawnigan as a school. So let's practice rising up in silence. Number one, let's take it away.
Now, back to the myth that I referred to earlier. I was having lunch and chatting with a Rev yesterday, and I told him we've heard enough about Peekaboo and the cats. It's time for a dog story. How many of you in here, and this is your chance, and I want you to be honest, how many of you have done or said something that you've regretted a few moments later? Mr. Lynn, you're lying. How many of you have texted something that you've regretted? How many of you have emailed? I think we know where we're getting at. I'm going to read to you a short story about a dog. And Mr. Samuel has stood in my 20 years at the school and has delivered this a number of times. And I was talking with Avon's aunt, Rhiannon, the other day, and somehow she was in here once listening to that, and she cried. So hopefully this story won't upset people too much. This is the legend of Gellert. Gellert is the dog, and it's a story of love and loyalty. It's a kid's thing, kid's story, so I'm going to read it to you as if you little kids. Gellert was the finest, biggest, and bravest of all Prince Llewellyn's hunting dogs. Yet, despite his strength and skill, he had never been able to catch the wild wolf that lived in the depths of the forest. One day, Prince Llewellyn was out hunting with his wife and friends. The couple had left their baby son in the care of a nurse and were just about to return home when Gellert halted in his tracks, sniffed the air, and started to bark. Suddenly, he raced off in the direction of the castle, despite Prince Llewellyn's attempts to call him back. When the hunting party reached home, the child's nurse greeted them, grief-stricken. "Please forgive me," she sobbed. "I only left the child for a moment, and then the dog." As she spoke, Gellert, the dog, ran up to them, frothing at the mouth. He was panting loudly, patches of fresh blood smeared on his coat. When Prince Llewellyn and his wife rushed into the child's chamber, they were dumbstruck. Furniture was turned over, tapestries had been ripped off the walls, and there was blood everywhere. In the center of the room, the child's crib was standing upside down, and the baby's blankets were torn. "Where is my baby?" screamed Prince Llewellyn's wife. "What happened to our baby son?" Prince Llewellyn looked at the damaged bedclothes and the blood-stained dog. He flew into rage. "You evil dog," he shouted. "You have killed my son." He drew his sword and plunged it deep into the animal. Gellert slumped to the floor next to the crib, and after one look at his master, died. For a while, all was silent. Then the couple heard a soft whimper of a small child. Prince Llewellyn's wife rushed over to the crib and, turning it the right way up, saw her baby son completely unharmed, lying on the floor. There also, close by and covered by blankets and tapestry, she found the body of a huge wolf. The wolf Gellert had fought and beaten. Too late, Prince Llewellyn realized what he had done. Gellert was not a dangerous killer, but a hero. He had raced away from the hunt, and when he caught the scent of the wolf, the brave dog had fought an animal far bigger, fiercer, in order to save his master's child. "Brave Gellert, you did not deserve this," said the prince. He turned to his men. "Take my loyal and faithful friend. We shall give him a burial that is fitting for such a courageous dog." The men carried Gellert away and buried him in a green field close to the castle. A stone was placed at the spot so that everyone who passed would know of Gellert's story. Much time has now passed, and towns and villages and roads cover with the area where Gellert hunted with his master. One of these villages is named Bedd Gellert, which in Welsh means grave of Gellert. The name can be found on a map of Wales close to Mount Snowdon, and visitors to the village can still see the slab of stone that marks Gellert's final resting place. Hopefully that hasn't upset you, many of you, too much. I read this to my kids the other night, and they were distraught that I was even contemplating reading it in chapel. However, please think of poor Gellert the next time you find yourself in a tricky situation. Take time to process the events. Be patient. Think before you sleep. Think before you act. Sleep on things before you react, and you may find yourself avoiding regrettable situations. Thank you. Now, talking of regrettable situations, I find myself in one right now. A few weeks ago, Mr. Lamont summoned me to his office. Down I came, and he was asking for help with this. And he suggested that I sing. Okay, we had a plan in place for me to sing with a couple of other people. For various reasons, that has fallen through. So here I find myself in a regrettable situation. So I am going to do it, and I haven't sang by myself since I was about the age of 10. At that time, I screwed it up, forgot the words, and ran off stage. So, please bear with me. It's not going to be the best singing you've heard in the chapel today, but I will give it a go, so please bear with me. Did run out.
Thank you, Andrew. Little did the whole school know that you were a choral scholar, tenor supremo, but I have to say, what tremendous courage you've just shown to stand up in front of the whole school and sing that song which strikes at the heart of all Welsh people. So thanks, Andrew. Next up, we've got prayers designed by the Rev. They're going to be read by Bryn Samuel of Ripley's, of course, the nephew of Gaynor and Rod. I did spot him first thing this morning heading to breakfast without a pair of socks, but a momentary intervention, knowing that his aunt would be deeply disappointed if he appeared up here without socks. I trust he's sporting some now. Come on up, Bryn.
We take a moment to think about those in need in our families and in the world. Please respond to the bidding, Lord, in your mercy, with hear our prayer. We pray for the people of Wales, that they would continue to be models of faith and resiliency to the world. Lord, in your mercy. We pray in thanksgiving for the many years and contributions made to Shawnigan by Mr. and Miss Samuel. Lord, in your mercy. For peace and understanding among people. We pray especially for an end to the violence in Ukraine. Lord, in your mercy. We take a brief moment to consider any other needs in our hearts. Lord, in your mercy.
There's a story about the next hymn we're going to sing. And Rod, I'm not sure which year it was that you took a rugby tour to Fiji. 1994. And a Shawnigan rugby tour. And as they were there, Rod suddenly heard through the sort of shrubbery and bush sounds coming from the other side of the island, and some village folk were singing. And Rod thought, God, that sounds a little familiar. And he sort of took out his machete and sort of worked his way through the undergrowth. You can see the explorer, Rod Samuel. And he turned up at this village, and they were singing, I hear thy welcome voice. And he just thought that was so magical. He brought it back to Shawnigan as the Ripley's house hymn. And it's very fitting that we choose that. And if I have a request of Ripley's today, not just in support of the Samuels, but some of your house staff, let's sing this with ultimate gusto as the last hymn of this morning. So, hymn number 8, I Hear Thy Welcome Voice, started in Fiji and now here at Shawnigan. Please rise.
Thank you all. I'll just take a minute. What a wonderful What a wonderful service. Thank you for all those who participated. What I'm left with is the line, I know Mr. Doyle referred to St. David's final words, which included the phrase, do the little things. And if there's anything in my mind that characterizes Rod and Gaynor Samuel, it's their attention to the little things. I often think of Rod, who would say, we're slipping a little bit. The students aren't looking quite as sharp as they need to, or there's a little bit of too much litter. And of course, Gaynor is really so attentive to details. So I think it's really, in some ways, their greatest contribution to us is that they have paid attention to the little things. And we, as a community, have done the little things that we've seen them do, to pay attention to the important things. So I would just end by saying that as you have blessed us in so many ways over the last decades, Rod and Gaynor, we bless you today. We ask God's blessing on you, and we ask that the love and appreciation that you feel today will remain with you for a very long time to come. Amen.
Miss Lacey, if you can play us out, and I'll invite the Rev and the God Squad to lead, and then I'll invite Rod and Gaynor to follow them. Over to you.